Hi, I'm Tim. I am the Tinkering Turtle. Today we're going to do the second video for the KBO series on my Breeze. Today we're going to talk about basic adjustments you should do prior to taking it out for a ride. We're going to cover adjusting the derailleur, adjusting the front and rear brakes. We're going to set the seat up, flatten it out, and get the height adjusted correctly. We're going to adjust anything on the handlebars that we need to before we go out. We're going to inflate the tires to the proper tire pressure. And in addition to that, KBO sent me out a new display after I sent them the serial number off my bike and pictures of the broken bracket. They sent it right out, so I've got that. We're going to put that on as well. We're going to talk about bedding the brakes, which is an important step when you first go out for your first ride. You want to bed your brakes. It's a very important step because what it does is it wears the pads into the rotor and increases your braking performance. So I want to talk about that because that should be the first thing you do on your first ride is bed the brakes. So anyway, let's get to it. Tools I plan to use today are pretty simple. I've got a level to help me set the seat at a level position. I've got a set of metric Allen wrenches. Most of the adjustments can be done with this or with just fingers. And I've got the KBO display that they sent me as a replacement. I have to say KBO was really quick about sending me this out. I contacted them with pictures. They came back and asked me for a serial number, and I had this really quickly, like a week or week and a half or something like that. It was very quick. So I don't think I talked about the proper way to plug in your battery. If it's on the bike, there's a side port you can use. If you take the battery off the bike, which I typically do, there's a rubber cap down in here. It's a little tough to get to. You pull open, you'll take the end of your charger and you'll put it in there. You'll plug that in first, and then after you're done, then you'll plug in the outlet. The light will come on and it'll turn red. That means the battery's charging. When that turns green, then you'll know that it's ready. Okay, let's talk about indexing on the derailleur. You have three adjustments typically on the derailleur. You got an upper and lower limit, which the upper limit stops it from going off into the motor past the first sprocket. The lower limit stops it from coming off the sixth gear into the frame. I typically don't adjust those. If you do end up taking your bike to a local bike shop to get the spokes adjusted, I do recommend that they check those for you. Typically, I only adjust the indexer, which is this adjustment right here. Now what the indexer does is it shifts the derailleur back and forth to make sure that the chain is on the proper gear. For example, right now up above on the shifter control, it says I'm in first gear, but as you can see, it's not on the top sprockets, it's on the second gear. So right now, this derailleur won't allow it to go up into first gear, so I need to adjust the indexer to push it up onto there. So what we're going to do, this is a pretty simple process. It's just like the barrel adjusters on the brakes. You'll turn it, and if you turn it, in this case counterclockwise, it'll shift the derailleur into the bike, bringing the chain up onto the sprocket. So I'm going to give that a few turns, and then I'm going to lean the bike up to get it off the ground, and I'm going to pedal it. Now you can see that it went up onto the first gear. Now what I need to do is I need to listen for any excessive clicking and make some fine-tune adjustments to make sure it's centered on that sprocket. So you can hear the clicking. So I'm going to give it a little bit more adjustment in that direction. And you can hear the clicking went away. So that tells me I'm centered on that sprocket. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the gears as they come back down through, and I'm going to listen for any excessive noise. And I'm going to do that the same way. I'm going to lift the back tire up off the ground, I'm going to pedal it, I'm going to click the shifter up above, and we'll see how that goes. Second gear, no noise. Third gear, no noise. Fourth gear, no noise. Fifth gear, no noise. Sixth gear, or is that fifth gear? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there's 7 gears, sorry. So sixth gear, no noise. And seventh gear, no noise. So now I know that my indexing on each gear is centered because there's no excessive noise, and it clicks through each gear successively. This is an important step to do. Again, if you do end up taking it to a local bike shop to get your spokes adjusted, have them check the upper and lower limits. Just tension those up so you don't have any issues going forward. Let's move on to the next thing. So next I'm going to show you the basic adjustment on the brake caliper, and this is a two-step process. Well, kind of a one-step all at the same time. I'll do a more in-depth brake video down the road, but just to get this set up, you're going to want to center the caliper on the rotor. I say this in all my videos and I can't get through it enough. Don't touch your rotor or brake pads with your fingers, because the oil on your fingers can cause vibrations and brake noise. So the process is pretty simple. You will loosen up the mounting bolts, which is the one here behind the barrel adjuster and one down here behind the arm, just enough where it's loose. Then you will tighten up the adjustment on the back, which I'll show you in a moment, and you'll tension these down so they're snug. Then you'll loosen the one on the back up a quarter turn and squeeze the brake handle and tighten these up. Once these are tight, you'll loosen the adjuster on the back one more quarter turn, and hopefully that'll center it up on the brake rotor. If it doesn't loosen up one, make some slight adjustments, tighten it back down, loosen up the other, make some slight adjustments, just so the rotor is centered in the pads. And if you look down through the pads through this direction, you should be able to see that. So this is a 5mm Allen wrench, and again, we're just loosening it up enough so it can move. We don't want to make it too sloppy. Okay, that's loose. So I'm going to come around to the back side and put the 5mm in the adjustment, and I'm going to tighten it up by turning it clockwise. Now what this does is it tightens the pads onto the rotor, so as you can see there's no movement on the tire because the brakes are basically at this point actuated. And then I'm going to take and loosening it up about a quarter turn. Just that much, that's all. Now that I've got that adjusted, I'm going to hold the front brake up above with my hand, squeeze it, and I'm going to tighten down the mounting bolts. Snug those up. Now I'm going to go around to the back side over here, back to the adjuster, and I'm going to loosen it up just a touch more. So now as you can hear, there's a little noise, so I'm going to loosen up the top one, make a minor adjustment. As you can hear, there's no noise now. So now we're going to want to just snug up a little bit on both these bolts to make sure they're tight, and then give them a good tight on the mounting bolts. Okay, the second step to this process is to check the brake handle as it goes back to the grip. This is too far. You should never have this touch the grip, because that means you have no more brake. So you want it to stop about a thumb width from the grip. To do that, you'll have this barrel adjustment right here, and simply screw that out, recheck it, until you get it about the width you want, and then you'll take this lock nut and you'll screw it back into the handle. That way the barrel adjuster stays where it is, and you'll have that approximately thumb or finger width when the brake is actuated. I also want to point out there's a second barrel adjuster at the caliper down here that you can do that same adjustment with. Let's move on to the back wheel. So the rear calipers, the identical process. You got a mounting bolt here and a mounting bolt up here. They're a little harder to access, but the process is the same. Loosen them up, tighten up the rear adjuster back here so it's tight, loosen it up about a quarter turn, squeeze the brake up above, snug down the mounting bolts, let loose the brake above, then come back, loosen up the rear adjuster, maybe another quarter turn, and then do the minor adjustments to make sure that when you're spinning the tire, there's no noise. I'm not going to walk you through it because again it's identical to the front brake. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Now I don't have anybody here to help me hold the brake while I do the work down below, so I'm just going to use a clamp. Like that. You can also use a string, just tie it if you don't have anybody to hold it for you. That's another option. And as you can hear, there's no noise. So I'm just going to tighten up the mounting bolts the rest of the way. That's done. Let's go up and adjust the barrel adjuster at the handle. So we'll check. That's actually a fairly good distance, but I want to pull it out a little bit more. Right about there, and we'll tighten down the lock nut. And the brakes are adjusted. So while we're up here, I think we should install the new display, get rid of this broken one that's attached in, and I'll show you. It's really easy to swap these out, and I'll show you how. First thing you do is under here there's a 2.5 millimeter Allen bolt. You simply take that out. The broken part of the bracket will come off with the bolt. Then you'll unwrap the wires. You follow this wire down. Now these connectors are water resistant connectors. They pull straight apart. They do not twist. They pull straight apart. And they can be tough, but they will come. They pop loose. This one is a 5-pin, it looks like. 5-pin green connector. Here's the old one. Now when you're putting these back together, I don't know if you can see this, but there's an arrow right here. There'll be a corresponding arrow on the other piece. There's also a small rib here that'll fit into a slot on the other one. So once you line up the arrows, just push it straight together and it's on there. Now you reverse the same process. You'll take out the bolt, you put the bracket around the handlebar, and then you put the bolt back in and tighten it up. Make sure to not cross thread it as you put it in. You'll tighten it down a little bit till it's snug, and then you'll orient the display so that you can easily see it when you're sitting on the seat, and you'll have it so it's in thumb's reach of doing it, and then you'll tighten it down. I have to say it's a very simple fix. KBO made it very easy. They sent the part right out, and now I don't have any issues with the display. Display powers up. Battery works. Mileage counter, everything is working. Powers down. Perfect. Now you'll take the wrap, get it started around the wires. Now one thing I noticed, this seemed a little tight. What you want to do is you want to turn the wheel both directions and make sure you're not putting any extra pressure on the wires as you wrap it up. And I think at this point I don't want to put any more pressure on the wire to the display, so I'm going to skip that wire and continue wrapping the sensor and the cable. Again, check the turning of the wheel, no pressure on the wires, we're in good shape. So next we want to set the tire pressure. Reading here, max pressure is 55 psi for these wheels. So what you're going to want to do is, I usually pick a number less than that. In this case I think I will go with 45 psi, and then I'll ride it, and if I want to bring it up to 50 I can. I typically ride on paved bike paths, so I'm going to want to run these, in my case, a little stiffer, just to get less rolling resistance. So I usually start at 45. I'll probably end up at 50 psi after I've ridden it a little bit, but I always like to start a little on the lower side and then work up to the 55. I don't like running max psi. If you hit something really hard, you could pop a bead loose and get a flat, so I'm not a big fan of that, but I'll probably run it at 45 to begin with. If you're going to have a bike, you're going to want a good way to pump up the tires and a gauge. So if you don't have one, get one. Let's do the back tire. .45 psi. All right, we're gonna loosen this adjustment here and rotate the seat so it's flat. All the stuff I've seen online talks about the seat being flat. You can adjust it slightly up or down based on your preference, but you should always start it out with it at a basic flat level. To do that, you've got this bolt here that you'll loosen. Okay, once loose, you can rotate it and you can slide it back and forth. I'm going to slide it kind of forward. I'm going to use a level. I'm going to stand the bike up. Snug down that bolt again. Double check it. That's pretty close. It's just a little nose down, but I mean it's very little, so I'm not going to worry about that. And then tighten that bolt back up. Now the seat won't move. Now to finish setting the seat height, you want to put your heel on the pedal and get up on the seat. And if your leg is straight while you're sitting on the seat, that's a good height, because then what happens is when you pull the ball of your foot back to the pedal, you get a slight bend in your leg, and that's where the seat wants to be. If your seat isn't at the right height, then you simply open the clamp, slide it up or down, and close the clamp back up. Okay, we've adjusted the derailleur, both brakes, we put on the new display, we've got the brake handles set to the right position, we've got our seat set up. Now we can go for a ride, but like I said before, the first thing you do for a ride is you bed in your brakes. It's a very important step. Please don't forget it. What you're going to do is you're going to go take it out on the straightaway. You're going to speed up to 15-20 miles an hour, and then you're going to pull both brakes. And what happens when you do this, the brake pads will start wearing into the rotor and get flush with it. But you don't come to a complete stop, okay? So you pull both brakes, you slow down to a few miles an hour, and then you feather the brakes back out. As the brake pads get hot, you can leave, especially with new brake pads, you can leave residue on the rotor. So you want to do this 10-15 times, bring it up to speed, both brakes almost to a stop, and then feather it back out. Don't stop during the bedding process. Once you've done that 10 or 15 times, you should be able to go nuts. So right now the bike's set up. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to go do a bedding process, and we'll see where we're at. Now, as you heard, Initially, when I was doing the bedding process, you could hear a squeal from the front brake. That got less and less each time I did it. You can hear by the last time I did it, it was virtually gone. If that continues, I'll probably use a product called Squeal Out, which I did a video on previously, and you just basically rub a abrasive compound on the rotor. You'll do the same bedding process and you'll just squeeze, and it actually wears the pads into the rotor better. Then you disassemble the caliper, pull the pads out, clean them with isopropyl alcohol. You clean the brake rotor with isopropyl alcohol, you get all that stuff off, you put it all back together, and it should eliminate that squeal altogether if it still continues. Like I said, during the bedding process that went away. I only showed a few speed and slowdowns there, but you can see by the last one that sound was gone. So I don't think I'm going to have an issue. Now my next step before taking this out for a proper ride is I'm going to throw it in the truck, run down to the local bike store. I'm going to have them tension the spokes because I can hear the spokes rubbing on each other, and you don't want to hear that. So I'll get that done, and then next video I will do my first ride. I'll try to put on 30, 40, 50 miles. I will do a review. I'll kind of go over the specs of the bike. So far I'm pretty impressed. It feels solid. I mean, it is a hardtail, so it's kind of rigid when you hit bumps, so you might want to consider a suspension seat post. But the front forks seem to work well. I mean, it's got okay acceleration. It is a 500 watt motor, so it is a little slower than a lot of the bikes I've done in the past, but I'm kind of excited to see what the balance between the human input and the motor input is going to be on a bike like this, and we will see that next time. So please, if you want to help the channel out, like, share, subscribe, show the video to your friends. If you want to take a more direct approach, there's a thank you button below every video. You can throw me a couple bucks. All the money I get through that thank you button goes directly back in the channel. I buy accessories to review, etc. I appreciate you watching, and I will catch you next time.